Okay, so this is the subject of our lesson today. A painting I did called Laguna Mood, which is just north of Main Beach looking back. This is the area considered Main Beach, and if the painting extended, you would see some volleyball courts, basketball courts, etc. back there. So this is an iconic scene of Laguna Beach. It feels very much like Laguna Beach feels, which is a really fun and summery day kind of place that is vintage, or I don't know, I want to say iconic Southern California. I want to walk you through the steps. I have a time-lapse video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the time-lapse video. I've taken screen grabs from the various, levels of development in the time-lapse, and I'm going to explain what I'm doing in each one of those. So this video should be more than what you get from the time-lapse. That's the intention, because the time-lapse are fun to watch, but there's more you can gain from something like this. So here we go. The basic block in here. Now, what you're trying to do in this step is to establish the largest shapes in the composition. So I have the ocean, distant mountains in the foreground foliage, basically, and what you don't have is the beach and the waves, okay? But that comes later. So with the big shapes are so important and so fundamental to a composition. Every painting rests upon the composition. It stands or falls on the composition. So we're laying in big shapes at this point. You're going to ask the question, are you painting in oil or acrylic? I believe I'm painting in oil. I do use acrylic a fair amount. Sometimes use acrylic to block in and finish in oil, but I believe this one is oil from start to finish. Here we have the beginnings of the palm tree on the left. There's going to be 3 palm trees that become central to the overall working of this composition. The other 2 are here. Now, I want to paint those on top of the water, so I bring them in after I've laid in the water. And again, this is, I look at painting as trying to get the composition right, the big shapes, get everything in place, and I like to do that quickly, and I spend the rest of my time refining. Now, I will say that when I do a time-lapse video, I don't really take the time to do a lot of real careful refinement. I basically, I want a painting, and I believe this is an 11 by 14 inch painting that I'm creating here, and I want it to take about an hour maybe, and then that's one sitting, that's one time lapse, and I'm not particularly fond of doing time lapses, and the main reason is I like to listen to music when I'm painting, and I listen to it on my iPhone. And so when I'm doing a time lapse, I can't listen to music. Now you'd probably say, well, why don't you get yourself another source of music? But that's just another problem I have to solve, and trying to, get stuff done and make a living here. So anyway, this is a second step of block in, working on the foreground. Okay, now we bring in these 3 guys. Boom, boom, boom. Very important. I mean, people recognize those palms, I would imagine. especially from this view. And they are also, they are dominant in that they're going to cover up almost, a third of the water. So it's important. And foreground elements add so much to a painting. I've got, this was a nice foreground because we're going to bring in flowers and various kinds of succulents, et cetera, et cetera. These are Mexican fan palms. This is canary palm over here, I think. I think that's the way it works. Now, the buildings, Laguna is full of development and a lot of hotels and restaurants along there. So we're going to, do what you always want to do with the landscape painting, and that is give enough information for it to read for what it is, but not get lost in the trees of a lot of detail up here. You have in Southern California red tile roofs often, and all you need is a little bit of like Venetian red or something on those roofs. You'll see that come in, and then that's going to read as sort of the Southern California kind of Mexican influenced architecture. Okay, here we are bringing in more of the succulents and the cactus, and I guess that's also maybe some palms that are low-lying and have been, I don't know, trimmed by the landscapers or something. I can't remember exactly what that was. This is an impressionist painting, so I'm not trying to create detail. I don't know the exact, description of every plant. I am bringing in some darkness, which, you kind of create when you paint a value pattern that can lead the eye through the painting in a way that you think works. So, and that's what we've got here. Now, I could have done the waves before I put in the trees, and that might have been smarter, but I didn't. And I often get lost maybe in the development of the painting, trying to get it all right, trying to get all the elements in place and where they ought to be, and proper emphasis, and then the refinement. But I don't think like, oh, I should have put the waves down first, then I paint the trees over the waves. In this case, I didn't, but so be it. Here we have more detail, and the waves are in. So look, again, I was able to get the waves in and kind of work around the trees. There's always going to be some place in the painting where you're going to have to work around things that are as intrusive, so to say, as those three palms on the right are. But it's working, and the ocean without the waves would be an ocean without waves. It would be a lake. So that's not what you see in Laguna. So those waves are important, and I've got the waves. This is maybe a southerly swell that is wrapping in and hitting this curve in the shoreline, but they do continue all the way down there, and it's important to get those right, although they're not as prominent. This is the last screen grab I did from the video, and you see a lot of color in the foreground. You see those rocks, and those are stones placed in the landscaping. It's often something I think about too, is when I'm painting nature. Am I painting, particularly like in a Southern California landscape, am I painting, someone's manicured landscape that is, on a regular basis, trimmed and refined and all that, or am I painting nature? Because it's going to be totally different. For one thing, if these palms weren't trimmed, being Mexican fan palms, they would get big beards as the palm fronds fall down and dry out and create this huge trunk. And there's a certain way you want to handle the color, because they go gray in the shadow with maybe even some blues and purples, but they're very bright colored where the sun hits them, and you've seen them rendered that way. But these again this is trimmed and manicured landscape because it's probably on some property or a park or something. So there is some, what are those things? I've heard this particular type of plant. You see it like, if you've ever seen a painting or a photograph of Jeffreys Bay, you'll always see these in the foreground. They're bright orange and they're beautiful. So we have some of those. So this foliage in the foreground gives you an opportunity to bring in color, and that is going to draw you right in with the strong foreground elements, and then allow you to wander through the distant elements of the painting. So that is the last screen grab that I did. So that's basically it. Let's see, is there any closing remarks? You have a strong composition with the Mexican fan palms on the right, kind of becoming this axis, a curved ellipse of the ocean, the waves, architecture. I made a point about the orange roofs, which we find in Southern California, but just enough. And when I zoom in now, you see how this detail just goes away. It's just a suggestion. Some of them, like for instance right there, is just a roof in the distance. You don't even see the building. And the buildings, by the way, there are homes that cover the entire hillside all the way through Laguna. Very expensive homes, and you have to give some suggestion of those. By the way, the blue in the sky, it was thick, wet oil paint, so it's glistening a lot, and it looks a lot. I'm not trying to paint a snowstorm or something, but that, as it dries, becomes a flatter blue, or, with some atmosphere. Southern California has tons of atmosphere. That's one thing that makes it a really great place to paint, because atmosphere, as opposed to painting like in Colorado in the mountains or something where the air is very clear, your distant areas are going to go into, a diffused look, and that kind of helps the painting, because what you're doing in a painting is you're trying to create the illusion of 3 dimensions on a flat 2-dimensional plane, and you do that with things like perspective drawing, but also the distant elements in the painting are softer, they're cooler, and the foreground is warmer and brighter, and that's the way you create depth. So there you have it. Thanks for watching, and I hope this is a little more of a takeaway than just watching the fun time-lapse video.